What's going on, guys, and welcome to episode 493 of AskGSM here today for Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great week so far. If you want to send in a question to the show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights. I forgot last night, I apologize. If not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. We kick it off here with Micah Does It from YouTube. Their first question was, what do you think of WWE giving Cody Rhodes the World Heavyweight Championship and Roman Reigns keeping his championships until WrestleMania, and then Cody versus Roman Part 2 for all the belts, and we go to just having one title next year after WrestleMania? I laugh. I love you, Micah. I appreciate the question. That is an absolutely fucking awful idea. I'm sorry, that is a terrible idea. That would completely defeat the purpose of a couple things. One, I don't even think Cody should have lost the WrestleMania this past year. I've said that before. I will continue to say it. I've yet to see anything that has convinced me that what they did was the right route to take. Cody should have just won it at WrestleMania. And for anyone wondering, as I've said before, and I won't go on a massive tangent as I have before, then what would have happened with the World Heavyweight Championship? You could have still started the World Heavyweight Championship with Triple H saying that these two brands need their own world titles. With the draft starting up again, the shows need their own world championships. You could have merged the Universal and the WWE Championship and still started the World Heavyweight title. Now they're stuck in a position where maybe they address this on Friday, they probably won't, where Roman is carrying around two championship belts and with no end in sight, which he could lose them at SummerSlam. I'm still hoping Cody wins Money in the Bank. He cashes in, announces it ahead of time for SummerSlam. We get the match there. Cody Rhodes wins it. Is WrestleMania a bigger stage than SummerSlam? Yeah. But I really don't want to wait until next year for Roman Reigns to lose these championships. It's already been almost 3 years. And he's had an amazing run, but he's still a part-time champion. I mean, it sounds like he will be at the Saudi Arabia show later this year, I believe, for Night of Champions. I mean, he's on SmackDown this week. I'd be very surprised if he was on SmackDown and then not at Night of Champions later. I mean, it's called fucking Night of Champions. I would imagine he'll be there. He's advertised for Money in the Bank. I would assume he will defend at SummerSlam. So we got a couple Roman defenses coming up. It still does not make up for the fact that he will very likely not be around for the better part of the next year. He should have dropped it at WrestleMania. They didn't do that. The issue with what you're arguing here, not arguing, but like the idea that you just threw out, is that, again, it would completely defeat the purpose of starting the World Heavyweight Championship for a year and then just go back to having one championship. I don't think it would have been complete. I'm personally, I'm a fan of just two top world titles on both brands. If you're going to do a brand split, which they ignore all the time anyway, I get that. I would rather see two top world titles. If they were going to have one championship, having one person hold it between the two brands, being a fighting champion on both brands, but being an active world champion would be fine. So if they had Cody Rhodes win it from Roman and they didn't start a second world title, it's better than what we have right now where Roman has one championship, he's only really on one show, and he's not even really on that show all the time because he's a part-timer at this point. You know, he appears more than, I can't even say that he appears more than Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar has been on the show quite a bit in the last couple of months. Between the Bobby feud, the Omos feud, and now the Cody feud, Brock's been on the show quite a bit since the beginning of the year. Probably more than Roman Reigns. So, I can't even say that. Anyway, and Brock's probably had more matches as well than Roman Reigns. Brock Lesnar wrestled in the Rumble, at Chamber, at Mania, not on TV at all, obviously. Neither is Roman, though, and at Backlash. Roman only wrestled at the Rumble, Chamber, and Mania, not at Backlash. So Brock has had more matches this year than Roman Reigns, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But anyway, I do not like that idea at all. If they're going to start a world championship on Raw, you got to have a world championship on Raw. Just to turn around and merge them is fucking dumb. We already did the Undisputed Championship thing last year. Let's not do that again. If so, then not anytime soon, not at any point in the next 10 fucking years. Give Cody Rhodes the Undisputed Championship. Do not, again, that's another part of the problem too. I don't want Cody Rhodes' first world championship, which is the whole kind of the part of it here. He has never held a WWE world title before. He wasn't even the AEW world champion, obviously. He was only ever Ring of Honor world champion, and that's about it. Obviously he held gold in AEW and New Japan and WWE and all these other companies, but never the World Championship. So I think it would be a massive waste to have him win the... I mean, this goes not only for your idea, but anyone arguing that, oh, he should be the first World Heavyweight Champion, or he should take it off of Seth, or whatever. I think to have him win the World Heavyweight Championship would take away from that moment of him beating Roman Reigns. And obviously the moment is beating Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns hasn't been beaten in years. But also part of the appeal is that Cody Rhodes has never been a world champion before, and his first world title will be the one his dad never held, the WWE Championship, and by proxy, the Universal Championship, because that's really the title Roman has held for the last 3 years now. So I just don't like that idea at all. I appreciate the idea. I just think that would be terrible. Hopefully they do not do that. I'm sorry, Micah. I really hope they don't do that. Your next question, what do you think of Will Washington being signed to AEW? I think it's awesome. It's really, really cool. I don't know Will personally. I've only ever really interacted with him on Twitter slightly. But he actually was on our Next Panel podcast, our Marvel podcast, which we haven't done in a while, just been busy, so I don't know if we'll ever do it again, I'm not really sure. But when we were having guests on to discuss, I don't know if he was on to help us break down a movie, or if he was on to help us break down an episode of a show. Like a couple of years ago when we were still doing the shows, like we reviewed every episode of WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We reviewed Loki, What If, Hawkeye. I don't think we did show reviews after that, like episode by episode. So I don't know if he was on for a show review. I think he was on the podcast last year, I'm pretty sure. And I interacted with him for the first time then over Skype or whatever we used to record the show. So he is actually a part of the channel as far as one of those videos from a little while ago. Beyond that, I really haven't had much interaction with him. But from what I understand, Will is awesome. He knows his shit. I've seen his podcast with Phil and Righteous Reg, the Crap City podcast. Obviously, I know Phil very well. He's been a part of that podcast, the Next Panel podcast, for the last couple of years now, and Phil's awesome. He's a good friend of mine. But yeah, no, he was on the Crap City podcast. They did great work there. From what I understand, he's done really good work on every show he's been a part of, and he's been a podcaster for a very long time. And again, from what I understand, that position he was hired for in AEW is a part of creative, PR, among other things as well. He's a man of many hats in that company, and I mean, people might make the argument, oh, we have another wrestling mark in creative and whatever. Listen, he seems to have a great mind for the business, and if anyone can help Tony, I think I'm looking at my questions here and seeing Cody Rhodes. If anyone can go in there and help Tony really kind of shuffle through the creative situation, not that Tony has a bad mind for creative, but he's one man handling X amount of people. I mean, the man would book all these shows, the dark shows, Ring of Honor. I mean, the fact that Tony is doing all of that himself is definitely an issue. I mean, he needed not a team, but someone else to really help him with that if that wasn't already the case. So bringing in someone like Will to really help him with that is awesome. Will obviously knows all the media people, so helping out on the PR side is great as well, among other things as well. So I think it's really cool that he got signed there. And again, it goes to show that anything can really happen as far as you'll never know who might pop up in one of these companies, be signed, be in a position of prominence, and he should be a really good asset there from all the accolades that he brings to the company with him, his experience, and what he was brought in for. I think that's really, really cool. His third question, how is WWE going to move the SmackDown Women's Championship back to SmackDown and move the Raw Women's Championship back to Raw? Do you think they will do a unification match at SummerSlam? I don't, because I feel like that'd be waiting too long. They have to address it soon. They did not address it on Raw this week. Maybe they will on SmackDown this week. I mean, Rhea Ripley is on Raw and is coming out with the SmackDown Women's Championship. Bianca is still the Raw Women's Champion. I thought they might wait until Monday to make an announcement because I figured, first of all, I mean, it would be pretty simple just to do a belt swap. And I say simple as far as it would be the easy thing for them to do. So I feel like if they were going to do that, they would have done it already. That does give me some... I'm actually kind of glad they haven't really done anything about it yet. They need to, obviously, at some point. I don't think you can keep the SmackDown Women's Championship on Raw till... I wouldn't even merge the championships anyway, but if they were, you can't keep these belts on the respective shows for another 3 or 4 months. I just feel like that's not practical. I feel like the women for one show and the other for the same reason I feel like we should have 2 world titles. You need 2 championships. Now, there's not a lot of star power on the Raw Women's division. You have Becky, you have Liv, Raquel. Rhea's first real feud on Raw is going to be with fucking Natalya. I mean, that's terrible, but listen, they have the talent. I don't think they need to unify the championships. They have a lot of talent. They just need to book them better. I want to see more people like Piper Niven on the show, Candice LeRae, Meechin, Tegan Knox, people like that. I just don't really feel like... I feel like those people would get less of a chance if you had one women's championship between the two brands. I mean, if you ditch the tag titles and, again, introduce the mid-card championship, we discussed this before. I feel like that'd be better than just doing the fucking tag title thing, which means nothing. But anyway, talking about the championships moving back and forth, the belt swap would have been very easy for them to do last week on SmackDown before the draft rosters went into effect, or on Raw this week. A part of me thought they might wait to do the belt swap because Bianca, they wanted her to break. I mean, again, if they do the belt swap, the reign is over, which I think is pretty fucking dumb. That's always been the case. Her longest historic reign is over like that, and she starts a new reign as the SmackDown Women's Champion, which I think is also very dumb. So they need to actually rebrand the titles. I said this last week that it was very unlikely. The fact they've waited this long and we still haven't seen it yet gives me hope that that might actually happen. The problem is that if you rename the titles or rebrand the championships, outgo the designs, and you need to bring in new belts, because the current championships have the red and the blue in them or whatever it is. So you need new championships completely. I don't know if they were already working on that, if they have to work on that now. From what I understand, belts can't be made overnight. So that's what I'm saying. If that's the case and they're making new belts, they might not be ready for a while. Are we going to have the SmackDown Women's Championship on Raw for another couple of months? I mean, that seems pretty hard to believe. I don't know. That's what I would do, though. I would give them new championships entirely, rebrand them. It really, if for anyone asking, what would you call them then? First of all, it's not really my job. Second of all, it really shouldn't be that difficult. Even if you come up with something that isn't the best name, I would rather them do that than call them the Raw and SmackDown Championships. I think people are missing the point here. Like people saying, I'm not even saying I would do this actually, but I've said, maybe like the Next Gen Championship. I've seen that used elsewhere in other companies. I'm not saying steal that, but like, for example, the Next Gen Championship, or just the WWE Women's title. And then the other championship is the WWE Women's Television Championship. I mean, you can still have them on equal playing field, like in AEW, where it's the AEW Women's World Championship, and then the TBS Championship. I mean, the TBS title really feels like a fucking... just a prop for Jade to carry around, and not really on the same level as the AEW Women's World Championship. But once Jade loses it, they should be equal championships. In WWE, it can be the same thing. If you don't like the fucking names, we'll get over it because it's better than the Raw and SmackDown Women's titles. That's just lazy, and it prevents it creates issues like this. And as I've said before, if you really want to keep those belts on the shows, then you make the champions ineligible. But they draft the women's champions every fucking year, so they have these issues, not only with the women's champions, but the tag team titles as well. It just creates a whole lot of issues. Let's see. Billy's question from YouTube, his first question was, you have interviewed some of the greatest wrestlers/superstars of all time. Has anyone you've interviewed been rude or not what you thought they would be? Good question. I think I've answered this before. Not really. In the last couple of years, I've done around 300 interviews. Not really anyone that I've interviewed has been like bad or, not annoying, but like has been disrespectful, or I really haven't had, to me, like as far as like an interview I did not enjoy or an interview that I thought went really, really poorly. A lot of them have gone better than others. Some I just thought were or like decent or whatever. As far as my own end, maybe they came out terribly to other people, but like as far as like the work I put into it or the way that I thought it came out, some are much better than others. The only one, and I've told this story before, I don't know if I've said it on this show, but I've said it to other people. The only interview that comes to mind in the last couple of years that I thought was, and he wasn't rude, it was just a very awkward conversation. And I don't think he was in character either, because there's also people that I've talked to. Like I talked to Sasha Banks a couple of years ago, and I asked her about being in the Mandalorian Season 3, which she ended up being in. But there was like a report that she'd be in the show. I thought the report was confirmed. I thought it was like an announced thing. Like they announced that she'd be in the show. They did not, and it was just a report that ended up being true. But obviously she wasn't going to say that. And I said, how do you feel about being cast for the 3rd season? Again, thinking in my head they had already announced her officially. And she said, no, thank you for putting that out there, but thank you, no. And it was like kind of like weird. And Sasha's like a weird interview anyway. I mean, obviously Sasha's great, but, she's always in character. That was not my favorite interview. I've done 2 interviews with her, I think. Neither are my favorite interviews because she's always in character. She's always talking about herself. I don't know if she still does that now, but I'm thinking... I was even warned by people in WWE before talking to her, like, hey, she's kind of like... I mean, especially since the first time I talked to her, she was a heel, I think. Or maybe not. I don't remember. They were good interviews, but I'm thinking, like, you always need to be in fucking character, like, talking about yourself. Like, that's not a good quality interview. It was really annoying. That wasn't the experience I was going to mention, though. I'll make it real quick, and then we'll move on. But, like, the one interview that I had where the person wasn't rude and whatever, it was just awkward, was, of all people, actually, when I interviewed Matt Taven a couple of years ago. I interviewed Matt Taven in early 2021, and I've actually interviewed him before almost close to a decade earlier, in early 2012, almost 10 years earlier. He was one of my first interviews on my very first podcast in early 2012. And he was great, and I didn't become friends with him or whatever, but I became familiar with Matt. He would know who I was when I went to shows, because the reason why I interviewed him, I don't know if he was in Ring of Honor at the time when I interviewed him first 10 years ago, but he had, some roots in a local independent organization. He was at the first ever indie show I ever went to, Northeast Wrestling. I would see him at those shows, meet him at those shows, go say hi. He would remember me. I had a mutual friend of them as well that I went to school with. So, again, he didn't remember me every single time, but he would remember my face every time I would go up and say hi over the years and whatever. So, a couple of years go by. I was super excited for his success in Ring of Honor. He became world champion. I must have said, he never actually explained this, and maybe it doesn't really matter at this point, but I was interviewing him, and again, maybe it's just me thinking too much into it. That's typically what happens. I texted him ahead of time. The Ring of Honor person gave me his number, which I assume is still his number. He texted me, I was given his number. I was told to tell him ahead of time, hey, here's when we're doing the interview, and he liked the message. And I mean, nothing really out of the ordinary about that, but most people would like. For example, the same thing happened with EC3 of all people, and EC3 responded back to me saying, hey, sounds great. Matt just liked the text, which I'm not a big liker of texts. I mean, I deal with RJ all the time, and other people do it with me. But in this specific circumstance, it was weird, because it kind of felt like, why wouldn't you just say, hey, sounds good, I'll talk to you shortly? Like, what if it wasn't Matt? What if he gave me the wrong number by accident? So I thought that was interesting. And then we get on, he was super stone-faced. And again, I know that he knows who I am because we've talked in person many times. Not that I'm a big shot or whatever, but I know he knows who I am. So we kind of get going, and it was awkward. I can kind of sense tension. And again, maybe it was just me thinking too much into it, and that's how he is normally. It was very odd. We get going, we do the interview, and the interview's on here in the channel, by the way. It's up here in the channel. Maybe you watch it and you notice something I don't, but it just kind of felt off. And we were talking, and he mentioned 2 times during the interview, at 2 different points, and again, maybe he was in character, although he was a babyface at this point when I talked to him for a Ring of Honor show back in early 2021. He goes, people have doubted me, you included, and all this other sort of stuff, and I'm thinking, that's such a weird fucking thing for him to say. And I haven't talked to him since then, I haven't met up with him in person or whatever, but just the way that he was talking about it was very odd. And he did eventually warm up to me during the interview when we ended up talking about other stuff later on. But it was just so fucking weird. I'm thinking, why? First of all, him knowing me, I've known him for 10 years now. I've known about him for 10 years, and I've always been super supportive of his work. And I just thought it was weird that he was saying that, oh, people have doubted me, you included. And I'm thinking, where did this come from? I thought we were on decent terms. He knew I was a fan of his, and I've been a fan of his for a long time. What he was probably referring to, which I kind of came to the conclusion of, was that years earlier, a couple years earlier, when he was the but the Ring of Honor World Champion, I definitely said stuff either in my reviews, which, again, I doubt he even fucking read, but I did put out at least one article that I remember that is no longer up, and maybe this is what he was referring to. I did an article a couple of years earlier when Ring of Honor was really not doing well at all. And I don't regret writing the article. I feel bad that he was offended by it, assuming this is what he was referring to. Again, he may have just been in character or whatever, and I might be reading too much into it. But I wrote an article a couple of years earlier that talked about the 10 biggest issues of the Ring of Honor at that point. And I made a very big point to illustrate that I thought it was a mistake, and in retrospect, maybe not, because the guy's a sex pest, but in 2019... in that moment, it felt like a mistake to not put the belt on Marty Scurll. That's who I'm calling a sex pest, by the way, not Matt Taven, obviously. It felt like a real mistake to not put the championship on the hot hand at that time, which, again, ended up being the right move, considering Marty Scurll's history. Now he's no longer involved in any major company. I thought at the time they should have put the belt on Marty Scurll and not on Matt Taven. I thought putting the belt on Matt Taven, for as talented as the guy was an odd choice. He just wasn't really, I don't want to say that he wasn't over, but he just felt like the wrong choice at that time. And I was super happy for him because, again, I was there when he won the championship. But I'm just thinking from a booking standpoint, the product no one gave a fuck about. Him being the champion did not help. He was booked decently well as champion, but it's just no one really cared about Matt Taven and the product with him as champion, at least compared to previously. And again, I wrote about that in this article. I actually ended up having it getting taken down, not due to my own thing, but I think the website was like, for whatever reason, maybe they thought I went too hard on Ring of Honor, and I love the company. That's the thing too. Like, I ended up doing more interviews for Ring of Honor after that, so I don't even really was something where it was a case where like the company didn't like what I wrote. It was very odd. So maybe he saw that, maybe he was bothered by it. Again, I feel bad that he was offended by it. I don't really take back what I said. I mean, some of these people get really offended when you discuss their booking. And again, it's nothing on the talent. It's very rare. Like, there's certain people that I just don't think are good. And if they're offended by that, like I wrote something that was pretty harsh a couple of years ago about Marina Shafir on my Twitter. And I just called her like one of the worst I had seen in the business at that point. Again, pretty harsh. I didn't tag her. I don't do that. I feel like that's kind of mean. Someone ended up snitch tagging her. So obviously she saw it. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I'm not going to apologize for saying how I feel as far as if this person's booking is shit or they're not the right person for that spot. I mean, I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to say anyone should go kill themselves. I mean, that shit's just terrible. There's a lot of fans that do that sort of shit. And again, some of that stuff I can be pretty harsh on. If they block me, they block me. That doesn't happen often. Like Marina Shafir blocked me, which again, that's she's entitled to do so. That's whatever. I don't really feel bad about what I said. It was pretty harsh, but it wasn't untrue at the time. She was kind of fucking awful. Matt Taven, same thing. I think the guy's great. I enjoy his work now in Ring of Honor. I've enjoyed his work in Impact and AEW and everywhere he's ever been. I think Matt Taven's great. I just didn't think he was the right choice at that time for the Ring of Honor World Championship. Again, if that's what he was referring to when he held a grudge all those years later, because that was in 2019, we had the interview in 2021. We didn't exactly clear the air. The interview just kind of ended and that was it. So it was very fucking weird. To make a long story short, I said it would be short, and it's not. I feel bad. I would love to clear I don't know if he has any issues with me. He probably does. I could just sense the tension on his end that day. And again, I haven't spoke to him since, so I don't know what the fuck happened. He probably is not a fan of mine. But if he doesn't like that, I didn't like that he was the champion at that point. And I thought he was, I don't want to say killing the company, but Ring of Honor was in the fucking shitter at that point. Ring of Honor was well on its way out. I mean, the company was doing worse that year than any other year in the last 10, 15 years. As far as however long I've been watching Ring of Honor, his reign was a low light of the brand. And it was no real reflection on him. It was just the fact of putting him in that spot. Like, there's a lot of wrestlers I love, but the fact is, for example, and I love The Miz, but what they have him doing right now is fucking awful. And if he was the WWE champion right now, or the World Heavyweight Champion, which I talked about a week or two ago, someone asked me about it, what if Miz won the World Heavyweight Championship? I would say that would be fucking awful. And it's not a reflection on him, it's on the booking. 9 times out of 10, it's on the booking and not the talent themselves. It's not on The Miz, and it's certainly not on Matt Taven. So, to answer your question, that was probably the most awkward interview I've done. I mean, that wasn't your question specifically, but like you said, had they been rude or not what you thought they would be? I thought that would go amazingly well because I already knew him. I interviewed him before. He remembered that. He knew that. He knew me from Northeast Wrestling. I would see him often. I mean, he definitely remembered me, I think, but he just wasn't overly warm. It was very odd. And again, maybe I'm just thinking too much into it, like I said, but it was just bizarre. And again, it is what it is. I'm not sad about it. I'm not excited about it, like, oh, I'm glad he hates me, or like, oh, I'm so broken up about it. I feel bad because I enjoy the guy. I would like to be on better terms, but again, if he didn't like what I wrote a couple of years ago, well, tough shit. Next, it just comes with the nature of the business, I guess, about as far as just being a writer, and not everyone's going to be your biggest fan, which is totally fine. You can't praise everyone or everyone's situation. I just think it's funny that a lot of these people, not a lot, but I've seen a handful of, like, even WWE talent, not at me specifically, but just get mad over people writing that their reign is garbage or whatever. Like, again, if you get upset at someone calling you terrible, because, I mean, if they're terrible, they're terrible, but a lot of these people aren't that bad. If you get upset at that, that's one thing, or like an appearance thing. I feel like that's really fucking dumb to, like, criticize someone's appearance on the show, like someone's physique or something. I think that's really silly. I don't do that sort of shit. That's kind of stooping it to a whole new low. I'm talking about, like, the booking stuff. If I say a match sucked, well, I'm sorry. It probably fucking sucked. I mean, I'm not a genius in any... I mean, that's not actually necessarily true. If I say it's true, then it doesn't mean it's true. But in my opinion, I'm pretty honest about this sort of stuff. If I didn't think it was good, it probably, in my opinion, I don't think it was that good. I'm not Dave Meltzer. I haven't watched wrestling for 40 years, and 40, 50 years. I've never been in the business. But I also think the nature of, and again, we're going way down a rabbit hole here. I'll be done in a second. But I also think the nature of, if you haven't done it, you can't criticize it, is also very fucking dumb. I mean, it's like going to a movie and saying you can't criticize a movie because you've never acted before. I mean, that's so silly. Again, off on a tangent here, so let's move on. Controversial opinion: Impact's female booking is the best of any wrestling promotion and has been far greater than both that of WWE and certainly AEW. What are your thoughts? That is the case currently, yes. I would say the booking of the women's divisions of all three companies, WWE, AEW, and Impact, it's better in Impact than it is in WWE and in AEW. That hasn't always been the case. I'm not going to say that's been the case all the time for the last 15 years. It certainly was in the late 2000s when WWE was still doing diva bullshit. That's not to say everything Impact did was great either. But they definitely had better women's stories, matches for the most part in those late 2000s, early 2010s. There have been certainly points in the last 5 years where the women's division was far better in WWE than it was in Impact. But Impact has a lot of great talent. Trinity's there now, the former Naomi. I thought her arrival last week came off really well. They have Jordynne Grace, Deonna Purrazzo, Rosemary. Mickie James is hurt currently, but she's there. I was going to say Chelsea Green, but she's gone. Meechan's gone. They've lost talent in the last couple of months. Tennille Dashwood's gone. Madison Rain's gone. They did lose a lot of women's talent, but even who they have left is still quite good. So they have a pretty good women's division. And, they have female feuds that are outside of the main championship picture. They have women's tag team titles that they book decently well. At least better than that of the main roster women's tag team titles, or even the NXT women's tag team titles. And, I'm enjoying the women's booking more in Impact currently than WWE or AEW. AEW, it's not as bad as it was, but the Outcast storyline for me, it's been better lately than it was a couple of months ago. I still don't overly care, personally. It's just kind of there. I feel like the Saraya Britt Baker shit's been going on for fucking 6-7 months at this point. I'm just kind of ready for everyone to move on. I just don't really care. I think Impact definitely has the best women's booking, and I don't think that's a controversial opinion. At the moment, I don't think that's a controversial opinion. At Reborn Again, John Ritland from the Twitter machine, and from YouTube as well. Real Honesty with John Ritland. Check out his content on YouTube. Does great work. His first question was, so in regards to the recent crop of NXT talents on Raw, what do you think their ceiling is, so to speak? JD McDonough, Zoe Stark, etc. So I think Raw got JD McDonough, Zoe Stark, I don't know if he would count Apollo Crews, but he came back from NXT, and Indus Sher and Indy Hartwell. So they got a bunch of NXT talents, and Odyssey Jones as well, who I don't think was in that video package they aired on Raw, unless I missed something. What is their ceiling? I think Odyssey Jones, who I said last week, probably has the highest ceiling of all of them. He's the greenest out of all of them, but I think he has the highest ceiling. I think Odyssey Jones, if he can continue to develop, and with the charisma he has, and he isn't bad in the ring. He's perfectly passable, but it's not like he's bad as it is, and he'll never learn. As long as he continues to improve, shows more development, develops the character, whatever, gets over with the audience, I think he can have a high ceiling in this company, to be perfectly honest. JD McDonough, I see as mid-card at best. I think McDonough's great. I don't think they see him as a main eventer. Size isn't everything, but the guy's just way too fucking small. Obviously Rey Mysterio and Daniel Bryan have completely shattered those expectations. It's not like AJ Styles is the tallest guy either. But JD McDonough is not AJ Styles. He's not Rey Mysterio. He's not Daniel Bryan. I think JD McDonough is, at best, he can go higher. I would love to see him go higher. I just don't think he will. I could see JD McDonough as possibly a mid-card champion. He may not even get that high because WWE has a lot of talent. But at that level, I think he would do well. Zoe, kind of the same thing. I don't know if she'll ever be women's champion. She's someone who's really grown on me in NXT in the last year, ever since her heel turn. As a babyface, she was bland as fuck. I didn't give a shit about her. The team with Io Sky was terrible. She just wasn't overly interesting in NXT as a babyface. When she turned heel, not that it solved all the issues, but she ended up becoming a lot more interesting. And she's also just really, really good in the ring. I feel like she can be a good hand in that division, help put other people over ultimately in that division, and help other women progress along and help them get better and stuff. Maybe she does become champion. I don't think she will. but maybe at that level. Could she face at some point a Rhea Ripley for the championship? Maybe. Again, I don't expect that to happen. I don't think she'll be a cornerstone of that division like Rhea is now and Bianca and the Four Horsewomen were and have been for a long time now. I don't think she'll ever be at that level, but she can be a good hand, a lot like JD McDonough in the men's division. Indus Sher, I feel like, can be a really nice, dominant heel tag team. I could see them at some point becoming tag team champions. Will they be short-lived like AOP and be gone within a couple of years? I mean, yeah, possibly. But I feel like as a team, they could do really well. Who is the other person? Odyssey Jones. Apollo Crews. I mean, I like Apollo a lot. Maybe he gets a one-off match with Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship on Raw. I just... If he didn't ascend beyond a certain level before, and he was only on the main roster less than a year ago, I don't see it happening now. He's been in that company for fucking almost a decade now. And he's great. He's had success. I mean, he's been in NXT. He was a United States champion, Intercontinental champion. It's not like he's never even held gold. I mean, it took him a while to get to that point, but he eventually held the mid-card championships in 2020 and 2021, respectively, which is great. I don't see him getting beyond that level either. It would be interesting to see, to give him a real push. I feel like that time has come and gone. He'd be lucky if he was even in the mid-card. I feel like Apollo Crews will probably be working main event going forward. I hate to say it. He'll probably be back in that role. But for the time being, I feel like a nice mid-card run to really kind of rehab him from where he was at this time a year ago would be a nice use of Apollo Crews. If there's someone I'm missing, or Indy Hartwell, I feel like has a higher ceiling on that show to me than Zoe Stark, even though Zoe's better in the ring. I think Indy's great. I've been following her for a long time, obviously, so I'm biased. I think Indy, over time, especially in the way she can kind of be on TV more with that group, can become a nice addition to that Raw Women's division. I see a better shot of her becoming Raw Women's Champion than Zoe Stark. Although, again, like I said, Zoe's probably better in the ring. But I think Indy's great. She has a real likability about her. She has good chemistry with Candice. They can become Women's Tag Team Champions if they want to go that route. So I see her having a higher ceiling in the Raw roster. Will she become another Four Horsewomen, Rhea Ripley-like figure? Probably not. I don't see that personally, but I do think she's great. She has a lot of potential, and I'm very happy to see her on Raw after all this time. His second question, we're just under 3 weeks out from Double or Nothing, and apparently they haven't sold out the venue yet. Is this perhaps a sign that they should try new markets for pay-per-views? Yeah, that's surprising. I didn't know that. Probably, listen, if it continues to not do well, I mean, this might be their last Raw. I don't think they'll do other markets. Should they? Yeah, listen, if the attendance is down, they probably should. And you're specifically, I think we're talking like Double or Nothing and All Out here. Because the other shows, Revolution, I believe, and Full Gear are in different places every year. I think Full Gear this year was in New Jersey, and the year before that it was in Minnesota, I want to say. Pretty sure. Revolution this year was in, where? California? And then I think 2 years ago it was in, I think last year, wasn't it in Florida last year? I don't remember, but they've changed the markets for those shows. I mean, they're going on the West Coast now, which is great. It's really only Double or Nothing and All Out that stay the same in Vegas and Chicago specifically. Chicago, I mean, I think they can stay there. I mean, I'm biased because I enjoy Chicago a lot and going there to the shows and whatnot. As long as they move the arena from the Now Arena to the Allstate Arena, that's really the key. Because that Now Arena, I've been in there, it fits like fucking no people, and it's impossible to get there, by the way, too. I haven't been to the Allstate Arena, but the Now Arena, it's nice, but it's just way too fucking small. And I know that's where they held the first All In 5 years ago, and it's a nostalgia thing, but the company has grown beyond that. It's time to start running bigger buildings for a show like that, so I'm hoping for All Out. If they do indeed do it the week after All In, which it sounds like is the plan, they do it at the Allstate Arena. They might not fill it in for 20,000 people, but it'll definitely fill in more than what the fucking Now Arena does, I'll tell you that much. For Double or Nothing, I mean, Double or Nothing, I feel like just the theme of the pay-per-view will very likely always be in Vegas. I don't think they always need to change out the markets for Double or Nothing. I think staying in Vegas is fine. They just need to put together a better card. I mean, this card, they're putting it together now, better now than they have in the past for these shows. In the past, they just announce matches and like at the last fucking minute. I know All In, they've sold 60,000 plus tickets, which is amazing, and it's a very great accomplishment without a single match announced. I understand that, but it's also the novelty of it as well. I mean, you don't really need the match announced. Hopefully, with more matches announced, they sell more tickets. But all those tickets are really for the sheer fact that they're even going to the UK. And It's the first time ever sort of thing. You want to be there for it. You know it's going to be a big show without even knowing exactly what's going to be on the card. For Double or Nothing, it's been the same show for years now. It's a fine show. It's been a pretty decent show for the last couple of years, but it's not like, oh, it's going to be this massive, amazing show. I mean, it very well might be, and it has been in the past. I'm just saying that it's not a first-time ever sort of thing. They're in the same market. They have a 4 Pillars World Championship main event, and that's great, but it's not worth, like, I don't know. I would probably, if I was in the area and I had the chance to go, I would definitely go. But for people that are in the area or people really flying in for that match, probably not. I mean, I don't know what the attendance looks like this year compared to last year. I mean, 2 years ago, they weren't in Vegas. They were last year. It was their first time in Vegas last year for the first time in a few years because of COVID. So that was kind of not a novelty thing, but it was a big deal to be back in Vegas for Double or Nothing. This year, it's like, we're back, but like, I don't know. It doesn't really feel like a special show. From the matches they're setting up, it should be a pretty solid show. Double or Nothing feels far inferior to All In, and even Forbidden Door in a couple of months. This kind of feels like the weakest of the three. And maybe it ends up being a great show. Revolution, I thought, was an excellent show. I just don't think the product has been hot enough to really justify these the pay-per-views always deliver. I don't know. It's a weird thing. I really don't know why the tickets aren't that strong. I know the weekly shows aren't great, and they're not overly exciting. But again, neither All In sold as many tickets as it did. I don't know how well the attendance was for the Revolution show. But then again, that was their first or second time in San Francisco. It was a novelty thing. They're in Vegas a lot for this sort of stuff. That's probably it. I'm not sure. I hope the show does well. I really don't know. I don't think they'll ever move away from Vegas. They just need to do a better job of putting the card together to ensure they sell more tickets. They'll probably, hopefully, sell more tickets between now and then. They just need a bigger and a better card to really convince people, hey, this show will be special. Come on out and want to attend. His next question. So that Backlash crowd was sure energetic, huh? How high might you rank that crowd energy in comparison to other wrestling crowds in the U.S. over the last 10 or so years, taking out the pandemic era for obvious reasons? I mean, it's got to be top 5, top 3. The last 10 years? I mean, the post-WrestleMania Raws at one point were really, really hot. Beyond the post-WrestleMania Raws, I mean, AEW's had a lot of great crowds. Chicago has always been a hotbed for certain shows and whatever for WWE, AEW. But I mean, in recent memory, it's got to be in top 3. I mean, that entire show was great, and that crowd played a very big part in that. If it was any other crowd, it probably wouldn't have been as special of a show. I mean, that goes without saying. But they were really hot for a majority of that pay-per-view on Saturday. And it was a really electric environment. So it's got to be top 3. As far as where you rank it with other crowds, I don't have every list of every hot crowd in the last 10 years in front of me. I mean, Chicago Money in the Bank comes to mind in 2011. That was over 10 years ago, though. I don't know. WWE hasn't really had... WWE specifically has not had crowds like that in a very long time. Clash of the Castle comes to mind. That crowd was awesome. In Montreal as well for Elimination Chamber, so those two come to mind. I don't know if they would beat Puerto Rico, but Puerto Rico's got to be either 1 or 2 for WWE in the last couple of years alone. Because even before COVID, I'm trying to think of other crowds that WWE had that were as hot for like one night of action that crowd was on Saturday. So it's got to be top 3, if not number 1. But Clash comes close in Cardiff from last September, as well as Montreal Elimination Chamber. That was an electric environment. I was there for that one. For SmackDown specifically, for that Sami Zayn segment, it was a wild environment. But overall, the Puerto Rico show was, I think, maybe better, and the crowd was better from start to finish throughout the night. Let's see. Backtracking here to at Iwagu91. Who do you see becoming the next NXT Women's Champion? I'm thinking Tiffany Stratton. So I think I haven't watched NXT from last night yet. I think the semifinals on the left side come down to Stratton and Roxanne. And on the right side, it comes down to Cora Jade and Tyra what's her name? Lyra Valkyria, I think. The former, I don't even remember what her old name was. But the Bird Girl from NXT UK. I've seen people say maybe it comes down to Cora Jade and... It's either Cora and Roxanne or Tiffany and Lyra. Lyra already lost to Cora Jade a couple of weeks ago at their Spring Breakin' show. Does she really lose twice? I don't think so. Cora won the first time. I don't think they have the heel win twice. I think Lyra's winning that second time. And then I just think a final of Cora and Roxanne, and they have history, and they work well together. The problem is that Cora would have to win. It's either Cora or Tiffany as champion. Roxanne already had her run. To take it off of her and put it back on her, I feel like would be silly. Tiffany, is she ready? I mean, she's great. I don't know if she's 100% ready, but is Cora Jade 100% ready? I don't know. I mean, both are just really good in their own ways. It really comes down to the both. I think Valkyria of the four would be the weakest choice as the next NXT Women's Champion. Just because she's good, but her character just isn't overly great, and she hasn't really connected yet. Roxanne is established. I would really have it come down to either Tiffany or Cora. I'm going to go Tiffany. I feel like they've wanted to put the belt on her for a while. I'm not even really sure why they didn't have her win it on that spring break-in show if Indy was getting called up, unless Shawn Michaels didn't know. But I haven't heard that was the case. If he didn't know, then I get it. If he did know, that's pretty fucking dumb. They should have just had Indy lose it in that match, especially since she got hurt anyway. They should have called an audible and had Tiffany Stratton win the championship. That's pretty silly. But I think it's going to come down to either Tiffany or Cora. I'm going to go Tiffany as the next NXT Women's Champion. I would not complain about Cora. Roxanne would be nice, but it's just like, why even bother taking the championship off of her when they did, only to give it back to her like a month or two later? That's kind of silly to me. And then Lyra, again, wouldn't complain, but I just don't think it's a great choice. So I'm going to go Tiffany Stratton as the next NXT Women's Champion. His next match, what is your favorite match of Gunther's Intercontinental Championship run thus far? That's a good question. Pretty much all of Gunther's defenses have been great. The Nakamura one on SmackDown was great. The Ricochet match was great. Madcap Moss was his best match in the main roster, but not a great match, but it was pretty good. The Xavier Woods match actually recently was quite good as well. The Braun Strowman match actually was quite fun on SmackDown back in January. To me, it comes down to either the Sheamus match at Clash or the Triple Threat at Mania. I would have to rewatch the Triple Threat at Mania. I was there for that one. I would probably go the Sheamus match at Clash just because of, I don't know, the atmosphere was a lot better. The Mania atmosphere was great, but the atmosphere for Gunther and Sheamus, the first one, and it was the best match of that year as well for WWE, I would say, beyond Rollins and Cody. I would probably go that one. I would have to rewatch the Triple Threat. That might end up being better, but it's between those two. Gun to head, which do I choose? I'm going to go Sheamus and Gunther from Clash of the Castle last September. His third question, before it did happen last Monday night, I've been reading on Twitter from Twitter users that they predicted Cody Rhodes getting attacked by Brock Lesnar to prevent him from advancing further in the World Heavyweight Championship title tournament. Did you have that same prediction? I did. I mean, I didn't think 1,000% that it would happen, but I had a pretty good feeling. I mean, again, it wasn't a bold prediction. I think it just made sense because Cody won in like fluky fashion at the pay-per-view. It only made sense for Brock to reemerge on Raw, and if the feud was going to continue, which it should after that finish, and I thought it should have continued anyway, that Brock would screw over Cody, because it wouldn't make sense. I don't want Cody in either World Heavyweight Championship, but it wouldn't make sense unless Brock attacked him on Saturday to have Cody not in the tournament. You know, Cody kind of had to be in it if he won the match. Why wouldn't he be in the fucking tournament? That makes no sense. So they had him win against Brock. They put him in the tournament, but Brock screws him over. That I just feel like makes the most sense. So I liked what they did there. I had a feeling it might happen. I'm glad it happened. And now we're getting the rematch at Night of Champions in Saudi Arabia in a couple of weeks. Let's see. Next question from @noob_n_co_TV. What were your favorite moments from Backlash from Puerto Rico over the weekend? I'm surprised that Carlito and Savio Vega made an appearance and are now part of the LWO. It seems like the feud between the Judgment Day and the LWO was very entertaining. I think the end of SmackDown was amazing, with Bad Bunny coming to the aid of the LWO and facing off with Damian. I mean, that's like Attitude Era level shit. I mean, that was fucking incredible. Really, the entire Bad Bunny Damian Priest match from Backlash was the biggest highlight of the weekend. The Savio Vega return was cool. I don't really have an emotional attachment to Savio. I didn't grow up in that time period. I don't know that much about him. The Carlito one was really what made me freak out, just because Carlito, one, is fucking great. And second of all, he was robbed of that reaction to the Rumble a couple of years ago during COVID. It was really cool to see him in the Rumble in 2021, but it just made me bummed out because he didn't get... honestly, the reaction that he would have gotten on that show compared to this one, he wouldn't have gotten like a massive reaction even there. I mean, he was like stone cold Steve fucking Austin on this show, on Backlash, because he's from Puerto Rico, he has roots there, the crowd knows who he is. At the Rumble, if he came back like this year, for example, he would have gotten a really good reaction, but not in the level of what he got at Backlash. So, that was the best part of the show for me. That was really the best part of the show, period. The Vega reaction was really special. The reaction that she got against Rhea Ripley was really cool. The entire show was just a lot of fun. The Bianca Io Sky match was also great overall, and that Io Sky reaction was great as well. So those were my favorite parts of the weekend from that crowd. I really hope it's not another 18 years before WWE goes back there, because that crowd was fucking fire. They were excellent. I appreciate anyone that was in attendance that partook in that energy and made it as fun of a show as it was and as electric of an atmosphere as it was, because that really was what enhanced my enjoyment of that event at the end of the day. Adam Hawkeye from Twitter, who was your favorite Von Erich? I didn't grow up during that period. I don't have a favorite Von Erich, to be honest with you. Most of them were dead by the time I was born, even, so I don't really have a favorite Von Erich, though I really do enjoy the work of Ross and Marshall Von Erich currently in MLW. They haven't been there in a while, but from what I've seen of them in MLW, they're quite talented, so I'm going to go with Ross and Marshall Von Erich. Those are my favorite Von Erichs, I guess. None from the original family, aside from Kerry, I guess. I've seen their work, but not enough to really say, oh, this was my favorite Von Erich, or this was my favorite Von Erich team, or whatever. At Kyle Rochelle 19 from Twitter, first question. Who can Rhea Ripley face in a legit feud? Is it just Becky Lynch, or can it be Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan this summer? Probably any of those would be great. I think Becky, Raquel, or Liv would make sense. Just the problem is that they're all busy right now. I really don't give a fuck about Natalya. The problem with her, though, is that they don't have a lot of other women that can face Rhea Ripley right now that are established. I don't give a shit about Natalya. I care more about people like Candice and Tegan Nox than I do Natalya. The problem is the casual viewer does not feel the same way. The casual viewer knows Natalya. She's been around forever. She's been around for 15 years now. She makes more sense as a first challenger on Raw for Rhea than either of Candice or Tegan Nox or any other woman on Raw right now. Becky, Raquel, or Liv would be great. They're just all busy. Raquel and Liv are the tag team champions, and Becky's busy with Trish. Rhea and Becky ultimately should be the feud that they build to, either at SummerSlam or Mania or whatever. Probably SummerSlam. Raquel and Liv would be great interim feuds. They could still do the feud, even though they're the tag team champions right now. I wouldn't do that necessarily. It kind of takes away from the tag team titles. Although I know they've had, Sasha and Bayley fighting for singles championships while also the tag team champions. I don't know. Just have Raquel and Liv do their thing, build up that division. Don't have them focus on Rhea for now. But at some point, yeah, Rhea and Liv have had a lot of matches. They always work well together. They have a history as a team from last year, so I feel like exploring that history would be fun. Same thing with Raquel and Rhea from NXT. They split wins in NXT. There was never a rubber match. I don't think they've had a match so far in the main roster as of now. But having that be a feud at some point over the Raw or SmackDown Women's Championship would be, whatever they call it at that point, would be great. Beyond them, though, there's really no other names that come to mind. Again, Candice, Tegan. The problem is no one cares about them. WWE needs to do a better job of building these women up so people care about seeing them potentially dethroning Rhea Ripley. Until that point comes, and I guess you can argue, well, people might care about them if they go for the championship and they work with someone that's established like Rhea Ripley. The problem there, though, is, one, they're not winning, and two, what would they have done to earn an opportunity? I guess you could say the same thing about Natalya, so whatever, never mind. Anyway, their second question, since Damian Priest won at Backlash, what's next for him? Will he be a champion again soon, whether it's the World Championship or the Intercontinental Championship? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think he's going to win the world title, although I did see that report from PW Insider earlier this week that they're now starting to see Damian as being higher in the totem pole than he was before. The guy didn't even have a fucking match at WrestleMania. But I think they were so impressed with his performance and his work over the last month that they now see him in a bigger and better light now than they did previously. He was on a roll. He was close to World Championship contention a couple of years ago. When he first came into the main roster, he was getting over. He was the United States champion. He was protected. And then it was like, I don't know, it was weird. They started doing that split personality bullshit, and then he just wasn't over anymore, and they booked him like shit, and then thankfully he turned heel soon after to join the Judgment Day. And that was really what saved his career. Not that he would have been released, but you never know. I I feel like at this point, he's always been world champion material. Is it more possible now with 2 championships compared to 1? Yes, it is. Will he be the world champion? I don't know. I don't think so. He could be maybe at some point. At the very least, I think he can win the Intercontinental Championship. Maybe not from Gunther, but at some point down the road, can he be Intercontinental Champion? I don't see why not. He's certainly talented enough to be at that level. I mean, he was a former fucking United States champion, so we know he can be at that level. It's more of a question of, can he be a top heel on Raw? Raw could use some more heels, so I would certainly see him at that level if they pushed him at that level, because I feel like he's capable, he's talented enough, and I feel like he's proven his worth to the company. Hey, I'm ready for anything you give me, and I'll make the most of it no matter what. And he's not getting any younger. He's like 40 now, 40-something now. So the time to push him would be now, and I hope he gets that push because the guy's great. At the average grunt from Twitter, kind of an interesting question here, interesting format. Hot or cold? And I'm assuming like hot or cold take. Hot take or cold take. He said, I think it's a bigger crime that Cesaro never won the Intercontinental Championship than the fact that he never won a WWE World title. It's insulting to me that the biggest workhorse in the company was never given a run with the workhorse title. That is a cold take. I would completely agree with that. That's not a hot take at all. I think Cesaro, although people always say, oh, he could have been a world champion. Yeah, with 2 world championships, could he have been the world heavyweight champion at some point? Yeah. I do agree, though, it is fucking crazy that before he left in 2022, for 10 years, did he not hold a singles championship? Or 9 years, I guess, technically, because his United States Championship run, although it started in 2012, did not end until 2013. But for 9 years, did the man never hold another singles championship. That Intercontinental Championship felt like it was made for someone like him. Instead, they just put him in tag team after tag team after tag team, which was good. It was entertaining, but I mean, he could have been a lot more than that. So it is kind of crazy, and it's more egregious, as you said. He didn't use that word exactly, but I would argue it is more egregious that Cesaro was never the Intercontinental Champion, and he's had opportunities at it before, by the way, than it is that he never won the World Championship. With that, I would agree. His second take here, hot or cold, I like the current Intercontinental title belt, but dislike the current United States Championship belt. Kind of a lukewarm take. I think you can like or dislike both belts. I've heard people say that they like the Intercontinental Championship. I've seen people say that they don't like it. I've seen people say that they like the United States Championship belt. I've seen people say that they don't like the United States Championship belt. They're nice looking titles. It's probably, it's probably just nostalgia for me. I like the other design of the United States Championship more. People fucking hated that one that they had for like 20 years. I really like that belt personally. The Star Spangled Championship. I like that one a lot, more than what we have now. As far as the Intercontinental Championship goes, I like the other one more as well. The classic Intercontinental title, the white strap. I like that one a lot more than the one that we have now. Although both belts currently are very nice, and you're not like, it's not a hot or cold take to like or dislike both of them. They're just kind of accepted at this point. They're not ugly championships. I just like the other ones more. That's personal preference for me. They're nice titles. I just would prefer the other ones personally. Last question from @BillMeister88. With the news last week that Robert Roode will likely be out for all of 2023, do you ever see him back in WWE or even in the ring again? He's now 46 years old, and it's a shame that he didn't get a chance in the Triple H era, but his age and injury might be too much for him. Yeah, I don't think, if he comes back, it's not that it's impossible that he'll wrestle again, but he's going to be out for so long. Like, he'll be out of action for a year and a half by that point. We have not seen him in the ring since mid-2022, like June of last year. I don't think he'll be back in the ring. They might just see him as being too old, especially if Vince is being back. I don't know if he approves everything or if he just changes things. Vince would certainly never push Bobby Roode on his own because he never has on the main roster. He really should have gotten a run as a decently position-sized heel on either the Raw or SmackDown roster years ago. They missed their chance. Even if he was healthy right now, would he have gotten an opportunity in the Triple H era of WWE? I'm honestly kind of skeptical. I think in the Triple H WWE, he might have seen him as damaged goods because Vince just did nothing with him. He's been at a certain level for so long that he might have just thought, listen, it's just not worth it. He's too old. He's better as like an enhancement guy or a tag team guy. I think it's a lot more likely Triple H either would have done nothing with him or just kept him with Dolph in the Dirty Dogs tag team. I feel like that would have been a lot more likely. I don't know if Triple H would have actually pushed him as a singles heel on either show. He should have if he was healthy. I'm just not 100% confident that he would have. I just feel like Triple H would have seen him as, listen, his prime years were a couple of years ago. I lost him in NXT 5 or 6 years ago. That would have been the time to push him on the main roster. They didn't do it then. He's 5 years older now. He's closer to 50 than he is 40. I mean, Bobby Lashley became world champion at 45 a couple of years ago. So it's not impossible. But Bobby Roode is also not Bobby Lashley. Bobby Lashley looks like a fucking, god among men. Not that Bobby Roode is bad, but Bobby Roode is quite good. He just doesn't have the star of like a monster heel. He can be a great upper card heel, but he's also been booked in a way for the last couple of years where people only see him at a certain level. And Triple H probably would have threw his hands up in the air and said, well, it's too late. They made him out to be a loser or a tag team guy. I can't convince people otherwise now, so what's done is done. Would I like to see him back in the ring when he comes back? Absolutely. I've always been a big Bobby Roode fan. Beer money, whatever. That's never going to happen at this point. But, I just don't think that's going to happen. Do I want to see it happen? I do. I feel like one more run for Roode in the main roster. It's not like the guy's 60, and it's not like he's ever really been hurt prior to this point. Would be nice to see to get him one last real run as a singles heel on either show. I feel like he would do well. Give him back the glorious theme song, but that's just me. And that's going to do it, guys, for today's edition of #AskGSM, episode 493 for May 10th, 2023. Appreciate you fine folks for checking out the show. If you want to send in a question to the show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.gsm.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not in the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. That's going to do it, guys. Have an awesome one. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.